Hello, my name is Avery Taylor, and today we'll be talking about the top performing player from every team this spring training of 2024. This list includes superstars, top prospects, and even some no names mixed in there as well. So be sure to stick around, tell me what I got right, what I got wrong, and who is your favorite spring training performance so far. So let's start with Edouard Julien of the Minnesota Twins. He put together a fine rookie season last year with 16 homers, 37 RBIs, and an 839 OPS, while also guiding the Minnesota Twins to the postseason and performing pretty well there too. But that's not what we're here about. We're here about his spring training statistics because we all know those are more important. And right now he has 21 plate appearances and has a 421 batting average, 476 on base, 789 slugging, 1266 OPS with 2 homers and 5 RBIs. Absolutely phenomenal spring from Edouard Julien. And to go along with that, fellow rookie from last season, Royce Lewis, is putting up absolutely phenomenal numbers, as well as their new free agent, Carlos Santana. Another player entering his sophomore season, we have Matt Waldron of the San Diego Padres. Waldron was pretty mid last year, to be honest. He had a 4.35 ERA in 6 games started, only threw 41.1 innings, and really didn't do much of note other than throwing the first knuckleball in over 2 seasons. But so far this spring, he's been putting up fantastic numbers and currently has only allowed 1 run over 9 innings, 6 hits, but has 8 strikeouts and only allowed 1 walk, and that was virtue of the hit by pitch. Just putting up great numbers so far this spring, and really none of the top performers for the San Diego Padres are really blowing it out of the water so far. You look at their other big performers, and it's Graham Pauley and Jose Azucar, just not big names, but certainly guys that are having great springs. Heading back to the AL Central, we'll talk about Eloy Jimenez of the Chicago White Sox. We all know who Eloy is whenever he is seeing the ball well, and that is a very, very plus bat. Obviously not that great in the field, but that's not what you're getting Eloy Jimenez for. Eloy so far this spring currently has a 520 batting average with a 538 on base, 720 slugging, and a 1258 OPS. Only has 1 homer, but 9 RBIs and 2 doubles. Just absolutely phenomenal so far this spring. And he has to be big this season for the Chicago White Sox to really have that much relevancy in the AL Central. Other notable performers are Nicky Lopez and Gavin Sheets, as well as Paul DeJong having a pretty good spring as well. Heading to the NL West, we have last year's National League representative in the World Series, and that is the Arizona Diamondbacks' Ketel Marte. So far in spring training, he has a 524 batting average, 583 on base, 714 slugging, and a 1298 OPS. Has 11 hits and 24 plate appearances, 1 triple, 2 doubles, only has 1 ribby, but has just looked phenomenal and is really looking to build off that postseason performance he had last year. Heading to the NL Central, we're looking at a team that's looking to bounce back in 2024, and that is the St. Louis Cardinals, and their representative is none other than Michael Ciani. Ciani has only played in 17 games as a pro, but so far in this spring, he has looked pretty decent, has 21 plate appearances, has 5 walks as well as a hit by pitch, so that's going to boost his on base percentage to a 476, but has a 400 slugging, giving him an 876 OPS. Again, he's largely getting boosted up by his heavy walk totals, but he's looked pretty decent so far this spring. I'll give him the nod, but we have to also say that Jordan Walker's had a pretty good spring as well. For the Phillies, it's a pretty similar story. They haven't really had a lot of breakout performances so far this spring, so I went with Aramis Garcia, career journeyman, who's just been tearing it up this spring. So far, he has a 500 batting average through 21 plate appearances, 571 on base, 833 slugging, giving him 1405 OPS. Again, very small sample size, but he's been absolutely crushing it this spring and will look to get more playing time. Another wily veteran that's kind of been overperforming at least in my opinion, is David Dahl, who found his way to the Phillies on probably a minor league contract. And he has a 932 OPS, so just a couple veterans putting up great numbers this spring. Moving up to a name you've probably heard plenty over the last few years, especially in the prospect world, we're talking about MJ Melendez of the Kansas City Royals. So far in the MLB, he really hasn't hit the mark of that high prospect status, but this spring, he's looking to turn it all around, as he currently has a 375 batting average, 524 on base, 688 slugging, and a 1211 OPS. Also has 1 homer, 2 doubles, 2 ribbies, and a stolen base. He's just looked a lot more patient and a lot more complete as a hitter so far this spring, and it's really exciting to see what he can do if he can really match that potential that he showed in the minor. Let's head to the Rockies to talk about another 25-year-old, maybe with a little less pedigree as a prospect, but is just putting up phenomenal numbers this spring and actually looked pretty decent last year. And that is Elias Montero. He's looked absolutely phenomenal so far this spring. Has a 304 batting average, 370 on base, 783 slugging with 1153 OPS. But he's not as far as it goes for the Colorado Rockies, as they have two more other players that are currently breaking out big time this spring with Michael Toglia and Bradley Zimmer. Heading back to the NL West, we're going to get back on the superstar train with a guy that's looking to prove he's still one of the biggest names in LA, and that is Mookie Betts, who is just continuing to put together a fine spring training and just career up to this point. Has a 409 batting average, 519 on base, 636 slugging, and 1155 OPS, along with one home run and two doubles and 27 plate appearances. Has almost as many walks as he does strikeouts. Has just looked phenomenal, and a lot of that comes against close to MLB level talent. So it's just looked absolutely phenomenal this spring to go along with Kevin Podlow, who's looked great, and Austin Gauthier. Heading to the NL Central, let's talk about Milwaukee Brewers' 25th overall prospect, and that is Wes Clark. So far this spring, 4 of his 6 hits have gone for home runs, and I'm sure that is aiding my opinion of him a lot. But, he's looked great. He's crushing the ball, and he has a 333 batting average, obviously a 333 on base, 1,000 slugging, giving him a 1,033 OPS. It just looked great. Obviously, he has some room to grow in terms of the consistency and on the defensive side, but it's just looked absolutely phenomenal. Other players of note, William Contreras, obviously, and Oliver Dunn, who's also putting together a pretty fine spring himself. Let's head to the actual state of Florida and talk about Miami Marlins pitcher Ryan Weathers. I know he isn't the big name in Miami, especially whenever it comes to pitching, but through 8.2 innings, he's only allowed 2 earned runs and is striking out 10.4 batters per 9 innings. The walk totals are a little high, and that is concerning, but he has a great whip and is just doing fantastic in limited time. And plus, there isn't a lot of great options from the Miami side. They have Tristan Gray, they have Jonah Bride, but neither of them are putting together like wowing springs to take that away from Ryan Weathers. A spring training that is going well has to be the Baltimore Orioles. We all know that Jackson Holliday is stealing all the headlines, getting all the attention, but it's really not even him that's being the only beneficiary of the spring training for the Baltimore Orioles. They are getting great production across the board, with the most impressive being Colton Cowser. So far this spring, he has 20 plate appearances, 15 at-bats. Obviously, that means he has about 5 walks mixed in there. He has a 400 average, 550 on base, 1,000 slugging, giving him a 1,550 OPS. He has 3 homers, 7 RBIs. Just looked absolutely phenomenal, but it just doesn't stop there. They've gotten great production with over 1,000 OPS from Tyler Nevin, Daniel Johnson, Kyle Stowers, and Jorge Mateo. Just absolutely great stuff, even from people that aren't even prospects. They're just making great players out of everybody. I don't understand. Heading to the Los Angeles Angels, they also have a good amount of people performing at a high level. Maybe not the same level as the Orioles, but that's a tough comparison to make. For the Angels, it has to be Zach Neto that we talk about. Made his rookie year last year, wasn't the greatest, but showed some signs of promise. And so far this spring, he's been absolutely lighting it up. Has a 348 batting average, 360 on base, 739 slugging, giving him a 1,099 OPS. Oh, by the way, has a double, triple, and 2 home runs and 23 at-bats. Just looked great so far this spring. Also, on that chopping block is Mickey Moniak and Griffin Canning. Heading to the Bronx, let's talk about the Yankees' number 2 overall prospect, Spencer Jones, who's been lighting the world on fire so far this spring with 7 hits and 19 plate appearances, a 438 batting average, 526 on base, 688 slugging, giving him a 1214 OPS. Oh, by the way, he has 4 home runs and has looked great so far this spring. Also, it is worth mentioning that Marcus Stroman is performing great this spring, as well as Anthony Volpe, who really has found his way with the bat so far. Next, we have to talk about longtime utility guy and journeyman Zach McKinstry, who turned into a superstar this spring. So far for the Detroit Tigers, in the spring, he has 21 plate appearances, but only 11 at-bats. He has 9 walks, only has 5 hits, but again, whenever you're counting that against 11 at-bats, that's pretty good. 1 double, 1 home run, 4 RBIs, 1 stolen base, a 455 batting average, a 667 on base, 818 slugging, giving him a 1485 OPS. Absolutely phenomenal so far this spring, but you have to take into account he has a much smaller sample size, especially whenever you come to the slash line and stuff like that. But other notable names, if that doesn't suit you, is Andy Ibanez and Ryan Cradler, who have also looked pretty good. Next up, we have former top prospect for the San Francisco Giants, Luis Matos, who's absolutely tearing it up this spring after a pretty lackluster rookie year last year. So far this spring, he has a 263 average, 300 on base, but a 789 slugging and a 1089 OPS. Obviously, whenever you have 3 home runs and 19 at bats, that's going to help it out quite a bit. But that's what spring training is all about: is small samples and how much you believe those are sustainable. I don't know where I sit, but 3 home runs at 1089 OPS is good enough to put him first on the list for the San Francisco Giants whenever it comes to their spring training performances. Obviously, you have a couple of guys that are also kind of in that same sort of tier with Wade Meckler and David Villar. Looked pretty good, but Luis Matos took the cake for me. Headed to the nation's capital, we're going to talk about a top prospect who is an outfielder. No, we are not talking about Dylan Cruz. We're talking about James Wood, who's been phenomenal so far this spring. In 30 plate appearances and 24 at bats, meaning he has 6 walks, he has 3 home runs, 5 RBIs, a 375 batting average, 500 on base, 750 slugging, giving him a 1250 OPS. Has just looked great in pretty much all aspects of the game that you would expect him to be great. Looks really mature for his age with the walks compared to the strikeouts, and just looks pretty good. He looks like a top prospect should. And the most important thing, he is doing this against really high quality opponents. Probably one of the hardest resumes against that we have in this list. So he's looked great so far, and I'm glad he is getting some recognition for the spring he's having. Obviously, Dylan Cruz having a great spring training as well, but also shout out to Robert Hassel. I never thought in my wildest dreams that the team closest to the Baltimore Orioles in terms of individual player performance so far this spring training would be the Oakland Athletics, but here we are. That is largely spearheaded by Zach Gelof, who had a great rookie year last year, 840 OPS from the second base spot, 14 homers, 32 RBIs, just looked great. But this spring training, he's continuing to build off that. Hit in 28 plate appearances, he has a 360 batting average, 429 on base, 720 slugging, giving him a 1,149 OPS. But it doesn't stop there. He has great surrounding cast so far this spring, including Estuary Ruiz, who we all know if he can actually hit, this guy's literally the next Ricky Henderson if he can just hit. Next, they also have JJ Bleday, and they have Miguel Andujar. We're putting together great springs. Now, obviously, that's why it's spring training, and that's the difference between the Orioles and A's. Orioles, obviously, these guys are superstars, going to be superstars. The A's, these guys are just putting together great springs, but I think it's really exciting. And it's great to shout out the A's sometime. They need all the love they can get. For the New York Mets, I let a little bit of that underdog mentality really kind of take over because Francisco Alvarez and Pete Alonso are having great springs, nothing to take away from them. But Tyler McGill has been having a pretty good spring, all things considered. And I wanted to give him a little shout out just because, he's a career journeyman. And so far this spring, in 8 innings, he has a 1.13 ERA. Started 2 of his games, came out of the bullpen for 1, but has only allowed 1 earned run, 2 walks, but has 13 strikeouts in that time, giving him a 6.5 strikeout to walk ratio, which is pretty good. All things considered, he's versing good opponents as well. So just a pretty good spring out of Tyler McGill so far. And I just wanted to give him the shout out he deserves, especially because he's just not a superstar like the other 2. Next, we're going to talk about the 10th ranked prospect for the Cleveland Guardians, and that is Angel Martinez, who currently sits at a 529 batting average and a 1,644 OPS. Yes, he has 9 hits and 17 at bats, but those 9 hits are currently divvied up with 2 home runs, 1 triple, and 2 doubles. He's just looked absolutely great so far this spring, and there's nothing you can really take away from him, and hopefully he can crack the opening day roster. Also, mentionable players include Ramon Laureano and Tyler Freeman. For the Boston Red Sox, they've been putting together a pretty solid spring as well in terms of individual performance, but it isn't necessarily all superstars, with the best of them being Nick Sogard, currently with 18 plate appearances, 14 at-bats, 2 walks, has 5 hits in those at-bats, 2 doubles, 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, a 357 batting average, 444 on base, 929 slugging, and a 1373 OPS. Just has looked great from that shortstop spot, but isn't the only guy performing, because you have the traditional Rafael Devers just putting up great numbers. Tyler O'Neill's having a pretty good spring training, all things considered, and so is Tanner Houck. Let's head about as far away in the country as possible and talk about Josh Rojas of the Seattle Mariners. So far in his career, he just has not been that great, if we're just being completely honest. Finds himself more as a utility man more than anything, but this spring, he's turning it around with the bat. So far in 17 plate appearances, 14 at bats, he has a 357 batting average, 471 on base, 714 slugging, giving him an 1185 OPS, two doubles and one home run of his five hits. Really does help out. But again, that's just great numbers, especially in a limited sample from Josh Rojas. So I had to give him his flowers. Other players of note for the Seattle Mariners include Samad Taylor and Ryan Bliss. Heading to Texas, let's talk about last year's World Series champion, the Texas Rangers, and more importantly, the player they could be adding to the roster to even improve it further, Wyatt Langford. Drafted last year, Wyatt Langford is getting his first spring training, and he is not selling anybody short. Currently with a 304 batting average, 414 on base, 826 slugging, giving him a 1240 OPS. Also has 4 home runs out of his 7 hits. He really does look like the truth and has 4 walks as well. Just looked like a great hitter all around. He does have a lot of strikeouts, but he's doing great so far this spring, and hopefully he can crack the opening day roster as well. Heading to the NL Central, let's talk about the ultimate hype machine, Elly De La Cruz. So far this spring, he has a 400 batting average, 520 on base, 700 slugging, and a 1220 OPS. He has only 1 homer, but has a double, triple, and 8 hits and 20 at bats. He's looked great, also has 5 walks, but 9 strikeouts. The biggest thing for him last year was he just really did not have the consistency. Yes, he had the highlights, but he also had some really low lows. But this year, he's looking to be a little bit more consistent and be a superstar like the Reds need to make it to that next step. Ironically, the next team we're talking about is the Pittsburgh Pirates, who have their own 6'6 shortstop with the last name Cruz. But we're not talking about him today. We're talking about Henry Davis, who has looked phenomenal so far this spring, in despite of facing a lot of criticism. Obviously, he was the number 1 pick back in 2020 and really came up as a catcher, but last year played right field and just did not look comfortable in the field. Was terrible hitting, just was not a great player at all in any regard. But so far this spring, he's looked fantastic in 18 at bats. He has 3 homers, 6 hits, a 333 batting average, 381 on base, 833 slugging, giving him a 1214 OPS. Obviously, it's important to know that this is a very small sample and it's not, going to be who he is probably for the most part in the regular season. Maybe he did turn it around a good bit, but even 1200 OPS is a bit absurd, but he's looked great. And hopefully he can continue this, especially because it's been against pretty good competition, all things considered. Other Pirates, players of note, Brian Hayes has looked phenomenal so far this spring, and so has his backup, Jared Triolo. The Tampa Bay Rays did it again. They did it again. I don't know what we need to say here. Amed Rosario looks great. He looked terrible for the majority of his career, below average shortstop on the offensive side especially. But this year in spring training, he just casually has a 1,143 OPS. 2 homers, just looks phenomenal. Of course he does. He's with the Tampa Bay Rays. They are just impeccable at turning around careers. And so has Jose Caballero, who just looks great again. And then also shout out to Ruben Cardenas, who has had a pretty good spring as well. Headed to Atlanta, they don't have these, top prospects or random guys that you've never heard of really headlining it. It's the same boring guys. It's Spencer Strider putting together a great spring training. And Michael Harris, once again. Ronaldo Lopez, maybe not so much a big name, but putting together a pretty good spring as well. Kind of a similar thing whenever you head north of the border. Not a super sexy prospect or not a super random guy that's just putting together a great spring. Nope, none of that. It's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. putting together a great spring. Shocker there. They also have Jose Barrios putting together a good spring. Shocker there. And Will Robertson, shout out to him. Okay, that's enough of that superstar junk. We need to talk about Owen Casey of the Chicago Cubs. So far, over one of the biggest samples of any players previously mentioned, he has a 1,197 OPS, has only 1 homer, but 3 doubles mixed in there, a 440 batting average, 517 on base, 680 slugging, has looked great and looked the part for the Chicago Cubs, and trying to really push to see if he can get up through the ranks in the minor leagues a little bit sooner. Obviously, getting great work in with the Major League Club is always a great start for that. If you enjoyed this sort of video, please let me know, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Let me know what I got right and wrong. Let me know who your favorite players have been this spring training, or maybe just your favorite players overall. But it's just been a fun time of the year, and I'm excited to look into these stats that just kind of mean nothing. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day.